Welcome to the Week 2 War Room, presented by Pro Football Focus. We're back another week, an absolutely crazy week, and we'll get into that in a moment. I'm your host, Jeff Ratcliffe, and with me this week, the incomparable Pat Thorman and the Thunder from Down Under, Ross Miles. And I think I should just preface that quickly, why people hear me say that occasionally. Some guy on Twitter like 3 years ago thought Ross was Australian, so he called him the Thunder from Down Under, and I just think that's very apropos. So, guys, what's up? Ross, how you doing?
I'm all good. It's just, I've had obviously a lot more time today to get ready for NFL Sunday.
Yeah, absolutely. How about you, Pat?
Doing good, nice quiet Sunday morning. Nothing, no news around the NFL. Just took a walk, had some coffee.
No news, unlike a Friday evening. Wow. And it's strange because I was out at the time when the news broke about Adrian Peterson. I got an email from one of my Twitter followers who occasionally emails, asks questions, and he's like, "Should I drop so-and-so for Matt Asiata?" And I'm looking at him like, that just doesn't compute right now. This doesn't make sense. And then, of course, boom, there's the news. Adrian Peterson indicted for allegedly committing a child abuse act, essentially. I don't know the legal terminology off the top of my head right now. Everything's alleged. He, of course, he turned himself in. He was released on $15,000 bail, and he's not active. And that means that Matt Asiata does become a really interesting play. Now, for me, and I know we have some different takes here, but I want to kick the show off with just Asiata because I know there's going to be some questions. For me, there's no question about it. He's an RB2, and you absolutely want him in your lineup. Hey, they're going up against the Patriots. The Patriots didn't really look that good against the run last week. Now it's slightly a different approach than that laser offense they saw against Miami. But, hey, we're going to be one man down without Jamie Collins for the Patriots, so that certainly bodes positively for runs up the gut, and that's exactly what Asiata does. And last year, let's not forget that he had that one monster game. I don't think we're going to see that, but I don't think there's much of a question. However, I think that some of you, I'm pretty sure, Pat, you disagree with me a little bit. So why don't you give your take on the Asiata Peterson situation?
Well, I mean, I agree that he could certainly hit low-end RB2 status. I mean, the Pats looked awful against the run last week. There's no question about it. Although, typically you don't beat Bill Belichick doing the same thing twice in a row. So it's going to be interesting to see if they stick with that 3-4 or if they try going to a more 4-3 look, without down one linebacker. That might be the best thing they can do. Because I mean, I like Chandler Jones as a 4-3 end more than a 3-4 end. I think you're kind of wasting a lot of what he does as pass rusher, having him on a 3-4, do that 3-4 end. So I kind of want to see how it shakes out between Asiata and McKinnon. If you have somebody else, I'd take a wait and see approach if you have a solid RB2. I wouldn't rush to put him in my lineup, but if you're in a pinch, there's no question there's a lot of some juice to squeeze there.
And our Neil Hornsby, the great Neil Hornsby, who is the man, the brains behind this whole operation, folks. He actually did put a post out on PFF Maine. Now, don't forget, there's awesome content over there too, so you definitely want to check out all the stuff that they're doing. Guys like Khalid, El Said, and Sam Monson, and all of these guys, Nate Yonke, are putting out tremendous stuff. And actually, Neil speculated on what the Patriots might do, and I thought it was pretty interesting what he suggested. Now, obviously, it looks like Hightower is going to move inside. That's not a question, and he'll be the sub-package linebacker along with Gerard Mayo. But Neil was suggesting that we might see Chandler Jones move to that outside linebacker position instead of playing the 5-technique defensive end, and the 3-4 essentially sticking in that sense. So that would be really interesting. And Ross, I know, just from when I hear that, my ears perk up because that means lots of tackle opportunities for Chandler Jones after a somewhat disappointing week 1. But Ross, what about your thoughts? I mean, are you buying into the fact that McKinnon can actually possibly get a decent chunk of the workload? Because my personal take on this is that McKinnon's a little too raw for that right now. But I don't know if you possibly have different thoughts.
I mean, I think we're under. I mean, I know that the running game is going to definitely drop off without Peterson, but they've still got Cordero Patterson, Greg Jennings, and Carl Rudolph to throw the ball to. So, although I am buying Asiata as an RB2, I've got him ranked about 20, 21 this week. I'm not sure that the volume, obviously Peterson's volume is not going to be there. I wouldn't be surprised, like you said, if they do kick the tires on McKinnon a little bit as well.
Yeah, there's possibilities. Athletic freak, for me and Pat, this is something that we were talking about through email throughout the week. I'm going to pretty much be all in on Asiata in daily leagues for those of you who are playing in those daily formats. Now it looks like we have Davis with us in the chat itself. Davis, is your mic operational? Do you have a question for us? So it sounds like it's not. Now, Davis, if you're hanging out and you don't want to talk, that's cool. There you go. Mic doesn't work.
Looks like you have it on mute.
He might have it on mute, and you can unmute that at the top of your screen, or you can just put your questions in the chat like you seem to be doing there. He has 4 kids who are loud. That is probably a good thing. Thank you for that. So what can we do for you, Davis, as we all take a sip of our beverage? That's coffee, folks. Those who are not watching this. Actually, while that's going on, I'm going to throw a question out that I have on Twitter. And this is an intriguing question, but I want to see what your thoughts on this. If you have to start one quarterback, are you starting Tony Romo or are you starting Colin Kaepernick? I'll sit over you, Pat.
Sorry.
Well, I think Romo's certainly going to bounce back this week. I'm not completely freaked out about him. I'm wearing his jersey. I'm hoping he bounces back also. But Kaepernick's got a good matchup. The Bears had a tough time last week defending the pass. I think Kaepernick, he can add some with his legs too. And if you're freaked out about last week about Romo, because he did look a lot more skittish in the pocket than we're used to seeing. I don't know if it's a result of his back or rust or whatever it is. If you want to take a wait-and-see approach with Romo, that's understandable, even though that's going to be a pretty high-scoring game. Kaepernick offers you probably a higher floor with his rushing ability. So the safe play is Kaepernick. If you're looking for a home run, send Romo out there.
Exactly. Any thoughts on this, Ross?
Yeah, I'm similar to Pat, really. I do think Kaepernick is a safer bet because of his rushing yards. But what worries me is sometimes, obviously, San Fran can get away from passing the ball. He can have very limited passing attempts. It's not uncommon for Kaepernick to have 100, 200 yards passing. And we know Romo's exactly the opposite. He could easily have a 400-yard passing game. So you're talking about upsides and floors and ceilings, all that kind of stuff here.
Yeah, I think week 2 is still the time where you can try and play it a little bit safer. You want that higher floor play. The scores are always going to be much higher when there's no bye weeks. But Kaepernick is the play there. Though, Pat, you bring up a great point about just that home run aspect of Romo. Hey, if you're trying to win a GPP this week, I don't know. Not a lot of people starting Romo, and we know the ceiling is massive there. Based on the Thursday numbers, doesn't look like he's in a lot of lineups. So you're certainly rolling the dice, but it could be an interesting one nonetheless. All right, it looks like Davis has his questions in here. Here we go. We knew it was coming. All right, Brandon Marshall we have. He has Brandon Marshall. The replacements are Mike Wallace, Fred Jackson, Lamar Miller. And I think this one is pretty easy without knowing even if it's PPR or not. But, Ross, what do you think? Replacing Brandon Marshall with either Mike Wallace, Fred Jackson, or Lamar Miller?
As much as I'm a Lamar Miller fan and I like his some of the goal line work he had, I'm going to have to say Wallace in that equation.
Patton is shaking his head in agreement.
Yeah, I agree. He got pretty good target volume last week, and then he had Revis to deal with. So, that's not going to go away.
Yeah, I think that Mike Wallace is really a lot of people are sleeping on him this year, and that includes me too. After seeing that week 1 game, going back and watching it, he's going to get a lot of targets. He's going to have a lot of yards this year. I think that's a pretty easy play. I understand the thought there, especially with Miami being down pretty much. Well, they're down 2 linebackers because Wheeler is going to play, but you don't really like. I think it's more of a C.J. Spiller day than a Fred Jackson day. We'll see though. But certainly going Mike Wallace there. Quarterback Romo again or RG3. Pat.
I'm going to go with Romo. RG3, he completed a high percentage of his passes, but they were, his average depth of target was minuscule. They were really kind of managing him. So he had more of a pass rush to deal with, but the defensive line of the Jaguars is nothing to sneeze at either. So I'll go with Romo on this one. I'll go with Romo on this one.
Do you agree, Ross?
Yeah, I do. RG3 really concerns me at the minute. I'm definitely steering away from it because of his potential upside. I'm not seeing the freeze.
Yeah, I have him actually pretty close in my rankings, but that Jacksonville defense is a little bit better than we thought they were. I think they're going to surprise some folks this year as well. So you certainly want to take notice of that. And just, hey, until RG3 does it, it's probably one of those situations you just want to avoid altogether. Finally, an IDP question from our buddy Davis. We have C.O. Moore, Chad Greenway, or Eric Berry in the flex in a tackle-heavy scoring. This one's easy for me. Ross, is it easy for you?
Well, I know your answer is Eric Berry, right, Jeff?
Correct.
We're talking about this is a matchup play, right? I mean, obviously, had a great game last week. We had that's whether that's best game, and it might well be. You've got to be aware of that. Greenway down week, very solid. I mean, Greenway probably play this play, but we're talking about a really good matchup, Berry. So I think I'd roll with Berry.
Yeah, absolutely. Ross, you're having a little audio issue. We can mostly hear you, but you're kind of going in and out. So just so you're aware of that. But yeah, it's Barry. I know the temptation to start C.O. Moore. My new buddy, my new best friend, C.O. Moore, by the way. And if you listen to the IDP podcast, you already know this. He called me out on Twitter for me calling him out, though not really, just saying that I think we've seen his best game of the season from a statistical standpoint. But good to own Moore. He's going to be an every down guy, and he's going to have a nice high ceiling. But boy, Eric Berry with no linebackers against the Broncos. I mean, can you get much better than that? That's exciting. So I have him in there. And, okay, one more, just sort of a follow-up on that Wallace question. Would you guys sit Brandon Marshall? I mean, knowing that we obviously have to wait, we're not going to know for certain at 1 o'clock. So would you absolutely sit him for Wallace just to sort of play it safe? What do you think, Pat?
Yeah, I would do that. The tea leaves right now seem to be that Marshall might get the start a little bit less than 100%. Jeffrey's probably out. That's kind of projecting. But when you have a strong replacement like Wallace available, you definitely want to take it. The question situation with Marshall.
I think I have that trippy effect happening with me now, guys. I can hear you all echoing.
Yeah, we're getting a little bit of it.
I'm gonna jump out and come back in. I think I might get rid of it.
All right. Well, we'll keep rolling on. Now we have Ray in the chat. Ray, you're muted. So if you know how to unmute, go ahead and do that, and we'll get to your question. If not, you can always ask your question in the group chat on the side there, and we'll certainly get to that. But in the meantime, we have tons of questions coming in on Twitter, so you can always get your questions answered that way if you happen to be watching on the YouTube feed. But how about this one, Pat? Joique Bell or Chris Ivory? Now, obviously, this one last week would have been a lot easier of a call until Ivory went out and kind of showed the naysayers that he can still get it done. And actually maybe looked like the better of the two running backs there in New York. But what are your thoughts there, Pat? Ivory or Joique Bell?
Well, I mean, Ivory's a guy who I've liked as a sleeper. I certainly think he's the better running back, for as long as he's healthy, which has obviously been the problem with him. I can hear that feedback again. As far as him versus Bell, though, I think that I would probably play it safe and go with Bell, although I think I have Ivory ranked a little bit higher than consensus. I think he should have some room to run in Green Bay. He certainly didn't look great on the defensive line last week. But Bell should have a goal line. And I think Greg Hardy might not play. They might deactivate him. We'll see about that. So I think Bell was the way to go.
Yeah, I'm going to have to agree with you. It's not the most ideal of matchups, but you kind of have to side with the again, the higher floor play. Certainly, Ivory has a massive ceiling, but the higher floor play, the safer play this week, it's going to be Bell. So going with that right there. It looks like Ray hasn't necessarily figured it out just yet in terms of microphone or chat. So Ray, like I said, if you want to ask a question, certainly we'll get to it. Looks like we have another. Just a general question, and this is an interesting question. Regarding Josh Gordon, now obviously it's looking like we're going to see a 10-game suspension, which means he'll return if this goes as planned in Week 12, which happens to be just in time for the fantasy playoffs. But are you holding this guy all season, kind of banking on the fact that you can get replacement-level talent in there so you can get the production to get you to the playoffs, or is it really worth it? And I'll toss it over to you first, Ross.
I think it's really a question of your roster strength. I think you have to be very confident in your wide receivers if you're going to do that. You need to look at how deep your benches are. I am generally against it. I think at 8 games, that would be about the breaking point. 10 games is just too much for me unless you're really, really confident in how strong your roster is.
Well, and it looks like he could pick up Asiata, Dobson, or Kelsey, and it depends on, do you want to win this week? We don't know what's going to happen with the Adrian Peterson situation. We don't know if this is going to be a 1-week thing. If it's going to be a multi-week thing, we don't know what kind of discipline is going to come, if that discipline comes this season or next season. There's just too many question marks regarding the situation. We'll get some information, it sounds like, early in the week, but we don't know. It's kind of one of those things, do you give up that lottery ticket for later in the season to maybe push you over the edge and win one game this week without really the chance that you might have, just Asiata for the 1 week and you're probably throwing him right back. It's a tough issue. For me, if I have the depth, I'm going to probably keep going with Gordon. It's not fun to take up that bench spot, but hey, like I said, that lottery ticket could be what wins you your fantasy championship. Pat, thoughts on this one?
Yeah, in a 10-team league where every team is pretty good. Most rosters are going to be good. You're going to kind of need a guy like Gordon come playoff time to differentiate yourself. And as well, you look at the waiver wire. There's always going to be somebody to pick up. There's always going to be somebody to get you through those bye weeks with a quality option. So having him in reserve to, like I said, differentiate you from the other good rosters in a 10-team league is definitely the way I would go. I'd hold them.
Sounds good. All right, so we have, looks like Steven in the chat, but Steven, you are muted. So if you'd like to ask a question, again, unmute yourself. It's a really simple process, and looks like you did that. Are you ready to roll? Can you ask? You got a question for us?
Yeah, I do have a really quick question. I'm concerned about Keenan Allen facing Sherman and the Seahawks. So I was wondering, would you guys recommend using someone like Justin Hunter, who has a favorable matchup against Dallas, or Darren Sproles on Monday night for this flex spot?
That's a really interesting question. And, again, when we look at these sorts of issues, one of the things that we'll typically assume a lot of times is that, okay, Sherman's going to be on their best receiver, but that's not how the Seahawks play. If we saw last week, okay, we expected, okay, Sherman's going to see time against Cobb, time against Nelson. No, it wasn't that. He was against Boykin the whole game, and the Packers wisely actually set it up that way. So I could see something similar possibly playing out in San Diego. We're going to have guys flip-flopping on either side, and we actually were charting this, and we don't have Sherman on Allen for a significant chunk of the game. So I'm not really worried. I'm going ahead and playing Allen there. I don't know if Ross, Pat, you guys have different thoughts on this?
Well, I mean, with an option like Justin Hunter, who has a great matchup, he got good target volume despite not even playing full snaps last week. This seems like the week Hunter is going to break out. And Maxwell's not a bad corner in his own right. And Rivers is not going to have a heck of a long time to throw the ball. Their offensive line is hanged up. So it's not like Allen's going against your schlub, and you have nobody to sub in for him. I would go with Hunter in this case.
Difference of take. Ross?
I'm a fan of both these players, and I own them in both in quite a few leagues. So I'm pretty high on Allen this season. I'm high on him this week, mainly because of what you said, Jeff. Against the Seahawks, you can seem to keep the wide receiver away from Richard Sherman, and you can try and take on Maxwell or Lane or whoever they feel. So I hope that's what Chargers do, and I think Rivers is definitely a smart enough quarterback to keep that well away from Sherman. But again, I also like I'm the guy I try away of getting my lineup, if at all possible. Pat highlighted it. It's a pretty good matchup for him.
Yeah, very high ceiling play with Hunter. We're waiting for that big game to come. It's going to come, but two out of three say Keenan Allen.
Okay.
So there's your answer. Any follow-ups? Are you all good?
Guys, I have like one more IDB question, if you guys don't mind.
Let's do it.
So like Lamar Houston and I think Enzai Ezekiel, I was a little concerned about their production last week, and I'm trying to decide which one to line up in my DL spot. I guess it depends on matchup, but I'm sort of like leaning on Lamar Houston tonight. What are your thoughts on those two defensive linemen?
I think that's a fair assumption on your part. Fair pick. We didn't see much out of either player in week one, but this happens every year. Defensive line's always a roller coaster, so you can't get too worried about it. Houston was actually really good for not putting up numbers, and the matchup actually, I think the matchup's really beneficial for him because we have one of the most run-heavy teams, and Houston is one of the best run-defending defensive ends, so we could see a lot of tackles out of him. It's not going to be a huge sack game. I mean, you certainly have the potential to get more sacks out of somebody like Ansah. But I'm going Houston there. Ross, do you agree?
No, I've got Ansah just in front, but they are very close. In fact, in our rankings, I think they're 10 and 11 or 11 and 12. So, yeah, there's not much difference between them, but I'm favouring Ansah slightly.
Okay.
So flip a coin.
Thanks, guys.
Good luck. Thanks, Steven. All right. So we have, is it Gabrielle on the line?
That's me.
I don't think so.
Dad, I'm on.
Oh, there you go. I wonder if Gabrielle was a subscriber. And being excited to talk to any one of us three, I don't know. Anyway, big news coming across the wire here. Carson Palmer will not play against the Giants. Drew Stanton will be the starter. Obviously, this changes some things. So, general thoughts here. Let's go, thoughts on the wide receiver situation. Michael Floyd, Larry Fitzgerald, even John Brown for folks in really deep leagues, but obviously you're going to kind of fade that play. But, Pat, I know you're really in tune with the Cardinals right now. So how are you reacting to this? What are you doing with Floyd and Fitzgerald in terms of your rankings now?
Well, I'm certainly going to move them down. I mean, Stanton is a fairly capable backup from what we know of him. It's not like he's going to be absolutely killed in passing game. But the Giants have some pretty decent corners. I would imagine the Cardinals will rely a little more on Ellington with dump offs. I mean, in PPR that kind of gives it a boost. assuming he's in the lineup. So yeah, I mean, I would bump Floyd down from a fringe wide receiver 1 to wide receiver 3, and I would probably have Fitzgerald in that same area. There's enough good receivers with matchups this week that yeah, I wouldn't force Floyd into the lineup as a wide receiver 2 if he didn't have to.
Yeah, absolutely. And the concern last week with Fitzgerald in those 3 wide sets, he wasn't on the field for some of them, and obviously we don't know exactly what that was, but it's the first time I can remember seeing Larry Fitzgerald in a Cardinals uniform not out on the field in 3 wide receiver sets. So it's a little bit alarming there, and something you certainly have to downgrade these guys. We're faced with a lot of decisions at this point in the week, and you got to downgrade them if you have a better option or maybe a higher ceiling option. You might want to go that route. All right, so let's go back over to the chat here. Ray has some questions in here. Ray, we already answered your Keenan Allen or Justin Hunter. 2 out of 3 of us like Keenan Allen in that situation. But then in a standard league, we have Mike Wallace, Toby Gerhart, Keenan Allen, or Terrence West, and we're only picking one of those options. So Ross, Keenan Allen, or not Keenan Allen, Mike Wallace, Toby Gerhart, or Terrence West, who are you going with?
I'm going to narrow it down between Allen and Gerhardt. Gerhardt, I think, will bounce back from a poor week one. I've got him around the 15th, 16th best running back. But Allen, obviously, I've explained I like him. The top receiving option for the Chargers, and I think they're going to keep him away from Sherman. I would favour Allen because I'm all aboard the idea of just getting on your wide receivers and expecting some big points.
I'm actually going to go the other direction with those two and go with Gerhardt. The Redskins' interior line's a little bit banged up. So the Jaguars' biggest their offensive line, so it's been a little bit easier to go for them this week than they had last week. In standard, touchdown scoring is more important, and I would imagine that the Jaguars have as good, if not a better, chance to score touchdowns than the Chargers will against the Seahawks.
Yeah, I'm going Gerhardt there as well. Just a higher floor play in that standard league. And the Washington run defense isn't necessarily stout, so I do like that play. To those of you watching on the YouTube feed right now, I am getting some tweets. We apologize for the audio. Take that one up with Google. Sometimes the Google Hangouts don't necessarily go very smoothly, but we appreciate you hanging in there and dealing with that. With our sort of improvised, we're not the polished studio version of these types of shows, but we're giving you just as good information. All right, so now in a standard league as well, we have Percy Harvin, Cordero Patterson, or Andre Ellington.
In this one, I'd probably fade Ellington. That over/under is going from 46 to 42.5. A little bit further. Touchdowns might be by the standard lead bout. Marvin looked great last week. It's a tough call with him. I would respect Patterson. He got a few more handoffs now with Peterson out. But his receiving performance last week wasn't exactly what you're looking for. Minus that one big play. So I would go Harvin in this case.
Ross, thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm going to take Harvin. Again, I'm like I said, I'm the guy who likes taking receivers, looking for those huge upside weeks. I see them as fairly similar players, and Harvin's the better of the two. Harvin's going to get those tricks to get some handoffs. He's also going to get. They weren't stat lines at the end of the game. I think there's a bigger chance Harvin breaks the long one.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I'm going Harvin there as well. And now Davis has a more of a philosophical question for us here. I think this is kind of interesting. He asked, do we care about our opposition, our opponent's roster? And he's saying if the opposing team during the week has Terrence Williams and DeMarco Murray, and we have Romo, do we care about that? And I'll actually take this one first. My answer to the question is pretty simple. It's no, I don't care. What I care about is putting up the most possible points. So if I can put up enough points to beat my opponent, and that means starting Tony Romo, even if he has Terrence Williams, then I'm going to do that, right? If I'm going to put myself in the best possible position to win the game, I'm not going to get too cute, because when you get too cute, you end up burning yourself. So for me, I don't really take that as much of a consideration at all. Pat, do you see this differently, other than how I put it?
I see this particular list is the same. You score the most points that you can, independent of his roster. The only time I would make a change in my starting lineup, dependent on another my competition, is if I look like I'm going to get beat. So if I look like I'm going to get beat and I have a safe play or a high upside play, If I look like I have an advantage, I'll go with the safe points. But as far as I'm concerned with players, I wouldn't affect my decision.
Ross, thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think the only time this kind of strategy would come ever into play for me would be maybe heading into a Monday night game. You've both got multiple players left, and maybe you're losing, so you can either offset their points by trying to cover up with a quarterback or use a wide receiver for that kind of thing. Or maybe perhaps I play in league playoffs. You have home and away game, week game. So maybe you had a big over the first game, so then you try and offset them by covering off. But this is a strategy for when I set my initial lineup. It never happened.
Well, I really apologize for the audio, folks. This is I know it's probably rough to listen to this. We're fading in and out, but we're gonna keep plowing through, keep doing what we're doing here, And Eric, you're hanging out. Looks like you put a question in the chat, so we'll just say that for you. He says Vereen or Floyd in a non-PPR. And we obviously just talked about how we're downgrading Floyd. Are we going with Vereen over Floyd against what looks like a pretty good Vikings defense? Pat, thoughts on Vereen or Floyd?
I'm going to go for Vereen, especially with the news with Palmer. It would be a little tougher decision if Palmer was playing, but Vereen got goal line work last week. That was automatically assumed to be Ridley's job, and if he's getting that kind of work, even if he splits that kind of work, that really puts him into the picture for even non-PPR solid RB2. And now that we're looking at Floyd as a free play at this point, Vereen solid answer.
Yeah, same opinion from me. I think Vereen's the safer play. You're more likely to see those 5, 6, 7, 8 points. Floyd could easily have a bad game with Danton starting. There's definitely less chance of him getting a 6, 7, 8 would probably be a pretty good game from him this week. If Vereen gets that, that's pretty average for him, I would say.
Yeah, Vereen's going to continue to see a heavy volume of targets, even with Gronkowski and Edelman on the field. So I'm going to agree with that one there. Now, it looks like Mike Costanza, our buddy, is actually it sounds like he's watching us on YouTube. Says the audio is bad. Sorry, Mike. But he says if Alshon Jeffrey is in fact out, he has the options of going with Santonio Holmes, Dwayne Allen, or looks like Jordan Matthews. So what do we do in that situation? Because obviously we're really limited if we're going to roll the dice. And it is tough when you look and I'm scrolling through the news feed right now and I'm seeing 75% chance that Marshall and Jeffrey sit. I'm basically preparing. That to me means they're sitting. I mean, stranger things have happened, but that doesn't sound very good. So do you like to sort of roll the dice on Holmes? Do you do the sort of safer high floor play with Allen, or do you do the massive ceiling but really low floor play in Matthews? Ross, I'll chuck that over to you first.
Yeah, for me, sorry, I'd be playing. What was the first guy? Sorry, I was checking the rankings. Sorry, who the three again?
Santonio Holmes, Dwayne Allen, or Jordan Matthews.
That was it. Sorry. Santonio Holmes all day. I actually have Santonio Holmes in the league. I thought he'd be an interesting sleeper this year. Obviously, with the two guys out, I mean, Cutler's got to throw it to someone. He's going to be the number one target. He's the number one wide receiver for that team.
All right, Pat, thoughts on this one?
I'm going to go for kind of the home run and go with Jordan Matthews. I'll explain why. I figure if you've got one of those Bears receivers, those are one of your top guys. So you're kind of behind the eight ball, I would imagine, with your lineup. So you kind of want to go with the home run play, and there's going to be a ton of that Monday night game. There's going to be a heck of a lot of points. And Matthews is going to go in the slot. I think he's going to have Butler on him. Bigger. I think Matthews is definitely the home run play, and that's kind of where I'd be going if I was behind the eight ball and was my wide receiver one.
Yeah, I actually like that play a lot. I was in a league this week where somebody dropped Matthews, so I scooped him up as fast as I possibly could to grab that. So you have to like that, and. I gotta love the wonderful technical difficulties going on here at the same time. But hey, I promise by maybe week 13, this will be a smooth running ship. Either way, back over to some of the questions here, and from Ray again, we get with Carson Palmer being out, we're picking one in a PPR. It's Keenan Allen or it's Michael Floyd. I'm going to throw this out there right away. For me, it's Keenan Allen. I don't think there's any question here, but do you guys agree, disagree?
I agree, it's Allen. It's not close.
Yeah, as much as I like Floyd, until we see how this is going to shake out with Stanton, I think Allen is a safer play, and that's amazing. Seattle.
Yeah, and so we're going with that, even in that maybe difficult matchup, but. It could be ugly here. Now, we've seen in the past, we've seen some backup quarterbacks come in for the Cardinals specifically. I'm thinking John Skelton against the Eagles and going nuts, of course, against my Eagles. But you can't count on those sorts of things happening, and this is just not a desirable situation. So you're going with your safer play here, which is going to be Keenan Allen, as surprising as it is, despite the matchup. Scrolling through, we have some Twitter questions coming in right now. And Ross, I have an IDP question. This is an interesting kind of deep IDP question where we have a defensive tackle question and then a defensive back question. So we have Sharif Floyd or Terrence Knighton. And, again, for me, this one's pretty easy. It's Sharif Floyd. You're going not with the space eater. You're going with the 3-tech. Really don't like to roster those space eaters. It's part of the reason why I was down on Dontari Poe this year, because you're just not going to have a massive sack ceiling. These guys are there to do their job. They do it, and maybe they get some tackles. Occasionally they're going to rush the passer, but not like those 3-techs. And Sharif Floyd is the Geno Atkins in that defense. So, Ross, do you agree?
Oh, yeah, 100%, Jeff. It's the case of if you haven't got a Sue or Fairley or maybe a Melton, what's the point in just rolling the dice on a guy who might get 1 or 2 tackles when you can go for someone like Floyd who could get a sack or something?
Yeah, absolutely. Floyd looked good in that week 1.
And the interior of the Patriots line is an absolute disaster. So until we see anything better from them, you're going to assume that's going to continue to be the case.
Absolutely. I compared them to essentially a bunch of overturned trash cans this past week.
Right.
Yeah, it's not going to be good for Tom Brady if he can't get protection. People are like, oh, Tom Brady didn't look very good. Tom Brady didn't look very good. No, his line didn't look very good. That was what it was. And there's a big difference between a quarterback not looking good and a line not looking good. And we've heard this out of other places. Okay, we saw a resurgence from Phillip Rivers. Well, that's not actually what we hear from the teammates. Antonio Gates says it wasn't a resurgence. He's been this good all along. It's the line is a lot better. He has better protection. When you have better protection, you're going to be able to play better. And unfortunately, it's not looking very good for the Patriots right there. Now, it looks like Jay has a question for us here. Jay says, with Jeffrey, a huge question mark. He's in a regular, he says a regular league, and then he says 14 teams. That's not necessarily very regular there. I love it. Love the deep leagues. His backups are Justin Hunter, Ken Tompkins, and Doug Baldwin. Who do you choose? I think this one's pretty easy for us across the board. Even though it is in its non-PPR, I think this is still a pretty easy choice. It's going to be Justin Hunter for me. Guys, do you agree?
Absolutely.
100%.
There you go. Nice, easy layup for you there. Easy start. Good luck, Jay. Thanks for the question. All right, heading back over to Twitter, we have a standard league question. Rashad Jennings, Terrence West, Mark Ingram. I think this is another easy slam dunk. For me, it's Rashad Jennings. You guys agree?
Yes.
Reluctantly.
Yeah, I do kind of. I think Terrence West is going to have a pretty good day today. The Saints, even last year, their defense, the biggest problem was their run defense. And they were able to protect it because they were getting a lot of lead. And the interior of that line is okay with the starters, and they have no depth. I mean, Brandon Dedrick had 28 snaps last week, and he sucks. So, I mean, if they have to roll into the depth, there's going to be some room to run there. And Cleveland has shown the commitment to stay with the run. I mean, they were down big last week to Pittsburgh, and they kept running, and it worked. So I kind of do like West, and I like Ingram too. But I agree with you. Jennings is the call.
All right, it looks like we have Andre on the line. Is that correct? And Andre's off the line. He got scared. Don't be scared. It's week 2, guys. There's plenty of football ahead. Some inactives and actives rolling through right now, so I'm just going to run through those quickly. A.J. Green is active. Good news for Green owners there. He's not playing 100%, but obviously if you own him, you didn't draft him to sit him on your bench, especially in week 2. Andre Ellington, active. Not a big surprise there. We talked about Ellington earlier. Maybe a good play in PPR. You could see a little bit more targets, but the touchdown ceiling is pretty low for Ellington in this matchup. Roddy White, active. Good news there. This Falcons offense is going to continue to roll. I'm not really worried about them going on the road. Cecil Shorts, inactive. But, maybe this is something we haven't talked about yet. It hasn't come up in questions. But maybe I want to pick your guys' brains about this. both this week and going forward. Are we buying Allen Hurns? I mean, reports out of Jacksonville where that Hurns is going to be cemented in this lineup regardless. He sort of leapfrogged Allen Robinson, and in a way it looks like he leapfrogged Marquise Lee despite going undrafted. A really impressive week one where he put up obviously some massive numbers against some really poor coverage from the Eagles. But are we buying into this guy? And by the way, if you were one of the 1.5% of people who started Allen Hurns in DraftKings, what do you know? Why are you not telling me this? I wish I would have started. Did you start him, Pat?
No, I was giving a hat tip to the people that did.
Yeah, I mean, completely unbelievable. I looked at some of these rosters and I'm like, hey, how did you do that? Like, where are you getting your information from? And please share. I won't tell a soul, right? But anyway, are we buying Allen Hurns this week? Are we buying Allen Hurns going forward? Or was that a sort of Kevin Ogletree 1 week flash in the pan? Pat, your thoughts on Allen Hurns?
Well, I certainly think he's better than Ogletree. I mean, he fits the offense. He has experience with it from college. It's encouraging that he looks like he's already leapfrogged, like you said, Robinson and Lee when Schwartz gets back. So, but the problem is the offense in general. It's going to be a run-based offense. The volume probably won't be there. I mean, last week he had a huge first half. He had those 4 catches for 120 yards and 2 touchdowns against Kerry Williams, but then he was quiet in the second half. So the production is going to be inconsistent. I don't see him being much more than a wide receiver 3, but I certainly buy him more than the Kevin Ogletree 1 week flash in the pan.
Yeah, I think Hurns is interesting, but mainly as a short-term option. I think he has leapfrogged those guys, but I'm not so sure it was based on talent alone. There's been some injuries to that receiver corps. Obviously, we know about Schwartz. I think Lee and Robinson have been banged up a little bit as well, which has hampered them. So I think long-term, Hurns is not the answer. If you can cash in on him after 4 to 6 weeks, I think you're doing a good job.
Yeah, absolutely. If you got your hands on him, you could be looking at somebody who, hey, people start freaking out over these guys, and you could get some good trade value for it. But hey, at least for now, it's here to stay, and I'm looking forward to when they actually ultimately get Blake Bortles in there. Maybe this could be an even better relationship with the obviously more polished passer than Chad Henne. But very, very interesting stuff always coming out of week one. Did not see that one coming. Watching the game, I'm like, who? Second touchdown? Who? But I don't pay a lot of attention to college football until the draft process begins. It's just not enough time for everything. Not enough hours in the day. All right, we're in another league. It looks like Jay loves these deep leagues because he's in a 6-teamer as well. And he says, is Jordan Matthews going to be a better play than Rueben Randall? Or is it Justin Hunter again? So we have our choice between Jordan Matthews, Rueben Randall, and Justin Hunter. I'm going to go Hunter again. I'm just not sold on this Giants pass offense yet. And we saw it, hey, speaking of Carson Palmer took him a good chunk of last season before he was really comfortable in that Arians offense. This McAdoo offense, we could be seeing a lot of the same things for Eli Manning this year. I don't know if this is necessarily the demise of Eli Manning, but it's tough to trust anybody in that passing game outside of maybe the tight end this week. So thoughts on that, Pat?
I agree. It's Hunter all the way over those other two, and I'd put Matthews over Randall for all the reasons you just said, plus the fact that it's going to be a pretty high-scoring game with them and the Colts.
I'm also on Hunter, but just throwing out there, does anyone else think that McAdoo looks a little bit like our own Mike Clay?
Yes.
That is awesome. That is maybe the best thing I've heard. You just made my day. Mike McAclay.
I would say that Mike would call a better offense than McAdoo because I was not impressed last week. Not impressed.
Oh. Mm-hmm. Brutal. Hey, news coming across the wire again. We now have Jordan Cameron out. So if you were relying on the tight end, you want to make other plans this week. I was relying on the tight end, so I'm quickly making a move before my waivers process for 14 minutes, 15 minutes right now? 16 minutes. I can't do math.
Shockingly, I was depending on Carson Palmer in one league, so I am in trouble. I am in trouble in that league. I've learned from Pat that waiting on quarterback is the way forward. He is the master of waiting on quarterback, in my opinion. I waited too long, and auto draft kicked in, and all the backups went, and suddenly I've got Carson Palmer. I don't know. Maybe Drew Stanton's my starter this week.
Maybe Jake Locker.
I did go and pick Locker up. I moved for Locker, and I've got Tannehill as well, so I will be starting Locker this week.
Good.
All right, so let's do a little bit of, now we're at this point where looking at tight ends, you're a Jordan Cameron owner, you have a couple options. Do you like Larry Donald this week? Or, here, I just actually got this question. Larry Donald, or are we going Delaney Walker? So we're now in that TE2 range. Larry Donald 1 week, lots of targets, but do we know this is going to continue in that McAdoo offense, or do we go with Delaney Walker, who put up a solid week 1?
Donald's certainly got a good matchup. The Cardinals can't cover tight ends. Although with that looking like it's going to be more low scoring than the Dallas-Tennessee game, and Walker had a good touchdown last week. Not getting fed like Patrick was the quarterback, but that offense looks it's got more juice to it. I have Walker over Donald, but both of them aren't terrible fallback options at all. Charles Clay, if you can somehow get him, I like him this week as well. Kelsey is another one.
Yes, it's definitely a close one between the two. For me, I've never been a massive Walker fan. He's not really the sexiest of picks. The thing about Donald for me is Eli Manning looked comfortable throwing to him in that system, and a system he is struggling in, and a system some of those receivers are struggling in. And if that's going to be the case over those early weeks, maybe Donald's just going to be worth a play in these first few games.
Yeah, it's a sneaky play. I mean, obviously, you get a much higher ceiling with Delaney Walker. That's one of those. You always have to make these decisions at this point of the year. Do you do the higher floor? Do you do the higher ceiling? And it really then comes down to your matchup. If it's a matchup where you feel like you have the potential to get crushed, then obviously go for that higher ceiling. If you think it's going to be a little bit of a closer matchup, or you have the edge and you don't want to give that edge away, then you're going with that higher floor play. And it's always a tough situation when you lose a tight end like that right before game time, basically. But hopefully you have enough time to make those moves. And looks like
we should throw it to Jason. Jason joined the chat and we put him on mute.
How's it going?
There you go, Jason. What's up?
All right, I have two separate. In a half-point PPR, would you flex Cruz, Boykin, or Ingram? And then in a full-point PPR, would you flex Kelsey or Greg Jennings? So one's half point, Boykin, Cruz, or Ingram, and one's full point, Kelsey or Jennings.
Were we all able to hear all of that?
I got the Kelsey and Jennings for the full, and Cruz and Ingram for the half, but I missed one.
The half. So again, half Ingram, Boykin, or Cruz.
Boykin's the other one.
Okay.
And that's half point.
So Ingram, Boykin, or Cruz. I'm going to take Boykin out of the mix right away. So we're really down to Cruz and Ingram in a half-point PPR. I still have to go Cruz as much as I just kind of downplayed the Giants' offense. To me, that Saints run game, hey, it looked great last week. 2 touchdowns for Ingram. Looks like he might be that goal line back, but you can't really guarantee with the way the touches are spread out. And they are going to find a way to get Cruz the ball. There's talk out of New York this week that this is going to be a huge week for Cruz, so we'll see. I'd rather go that direction. Pat?
I'm giving Cruz one more week, and I am tempted with Ingram, just like you were. He was running the wrong routes. He was running downfield routes last week, which was surprising. So giving him one more week to get those underneath routes together, and they're trying to go quick. They're trying to get those short routes. So after PR, I'm sticking with Cruz, but it's closer than you would think it would be.
Yeah, and then the other one. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Ross.
I think I'm going to give the answer that you guys both wanted to give, and the answer is Ingram. It's the swagger pick. All three of us are sitting here going, we don't like Cruz, but you should play Cruz. So come on, the swagger pick, play Ingram, and get those touchdowns.
There you go. 2 out of 3. So you side with who you want to side with there. Then we have Jennings and Kelsey, and it's another one of those issues of high floor, or higher floor, let's say, and massive ceiling. For me, I'm probably going to shade towards Jennings here. I love the mind meld between Jennings and Matt Castle. So as long as Castle is in there, I really do like Jennings as that wide receiver 3. Now, Kelsey certainly could have a massive week, but then again, this game's going to be ugly very quickly. And, I mean, hey, Kelsey possibly seeing some TJ Ward. I don't like that. I really don't like that matchup that much this week. So for me, I'm going Jennings. Guys, agree, disagree?
I'm gonna disagree on this one. I think Jennings is gonna see some of Revis. I don't think they're gonna put Revis on Patterson. They move Patterson around too much for him to stick with him. You know, Revis is gonna play aside. He's gonna see a lot of Jennings. The Chiefs are gonna get blown out. They're gonna be throwing the ball to catch up. Bo's back, sure, but I mean, even Andy Reid said they didn't play Kels enough last week. Denver linebackers are banged up. They're not great in coverage to begin with. So I think Kels has got almost the same floor as Jennings, with a higher PPR, full PPR ceiling.
I am going to say Jennings. I'm going to side with Jeff on this one because I like the Castle to Jennings connection. The loss of Peterson, I think they're going to lean a little bit more on the pass game. Kelsey, as I love Kelsey, but not yet, not quite yet.
Not quite yet. All right.
Thanks,
Where
guys.
is that noise coming from?
I think
Huge.
somewhere around me. My window's open. Someone must be stealing a car outside. I live in London, remember?
Lots of cars getting stolen in London. Remember that if you ever go to live there. All right, so we have some more inactives coming across the wire here. Taking a look. D'Angelo Williams, as expected, inactive. Noshan Moreno, active. And Greg Hardy, deactivated, as we speculated earlier. So if you are a Hardy owner, hey, this is the reason why he wasn't in our elite tiers going into the season. Obviously an elite level player on the field, but that off the field issue, especially now, has gotten, it's a little bit messier given the recent events, especially of this week. So the Panthers decided to deactivate him because of this issue. If you have Hardy and you're looking for somebody else, our buddy Mike Costanzo on Twitter here just asked if Jarrell Casey is a viable replacement, and the answer is yes, absolutely. The Cowboys' offensive line is pretty good, but Casey looked really impressive, as did Derek Morgan, but remember Derek Morgan's playing the outside linebacker position. Casey looked awesome in week 1. I think this could be a potentially very big day for Casey, so it's a great pickup there. Ross, just throwing this over to you. Do you have any other under-the-radar defensive ends maybe for this week?
I don't know if I could call him under the radar. Everson Griffin. It depends what kind of league you're in. I think he's really making a big step up. Another guy we've got in that kind of bracket would be Olivier Vernon. These are the guys that people just aren't big names, but have that potential to step up into that top tier.
Absolutely. All right. Let's see if we have anything else. Guys, do you have any on your Twitter or anything like that right now? I got a bunch, but let's get to some of your guys too.
Just one thing quick, Kenny Stills is playing, which I'm interested to see how Cooks is used with Stills in the lineup. I mean, they had Morgan last week, who was not really a threat to Cooks' workload. And Cooks was a lot more involved in the first half, so you figure it was a lot more scripted plays beginning of the game that got him involved. And now that Stills back, I mean, everyone's gaga over Cooks, and for good reason, but I think this is going to be a little more indicative today of what we can expect looking forward for Cooks. So just something to keep an eye on.
Absolutely, yeah. We'll get a better representation of what that pass offense is going to look like with them more at full strength. So, and everybody, yeah, they do. They love that Brandon Cooks. There's a lot of impressive rookies this year, so it's an exciting time. It's great to see the league changing and sort of, we don't have to wait 3 years now for these receivers to really hit. Ross, we have an IDP question, and I think this is an interesting one on Twitter. So we both actually received this from RJ. He asks, he needs 2 flex plays. He has Eric Berry. Obviously, he's playing. The other 3 are interesting, though. Calvin Pryor, Telvin Smith, or Chris Kirksey. And why I say this is interesting is neither Smith nor Kirksey are playing in the base downs right now. They're both just sub-package players. Now, Kirksey played 60 snaps because the Browns only played 13 snaps in their base defense last week. So it looked like he's this wonderful play where we may not see that necessarily play out exactly the same on a week-to-week basis. So would you consider going with Kirksey or Smith over Pryor, or are you going to stick with the every down safety?
I think you have to stay with the every down safety just because we haven't got evidence that those two are going to get on the field enough to generate points yet, Jeff. It's a simple mathematic play. Although I think Smith and Kirksey are decent IDP options going forward, not this week.
Agreed. We have a kicker question. Drop the balloons. The confetti comes down. So we have Davis has 3 kickers here: Parkey, McManus, or Mason Crosby. I really hope you don't own 3 kickers. I really hope you don't own 2 kickers. Of those 3. Boy, I would probably go. No, they're all on the waiver wire. Thank you. You had me nervous there, Davis. I like McManus just because it's a really high floor play, and this is going to be ugly. I think the line is like last I looked is like 12.5 or something like that, and I wouldn't be surprised if Denver wins by 30. People really aren't grasping just how important Derek Johnson is to this defense. So for me, it's McManus. We don't get a lot of these kicker questions, but I do love it. So, Pat, McManus, Crosby, or Parkey?
I'm with you on McManus. They're not going to be losing. There's really no game script that's projectable that they would pass up field goals, unless they're up 30 at the end of the game. It's McManus. It's going to be a high-scoring game. The over/under is 50.5. That's. I got an interesting one on Twitter to test our Hunter love. Hunter or Alfred Morris in a full PPR?
Oh, that's tough.
Yeah.
That's because obviously again you're looking at that huge upside. I still am going to go with Morris, just because it's to me it's the safer play. It's the play where you're guaranteed to see a lot more touches than Hunter. Hunter could make your fantasy week in one play. But we can't guarantee that's going to happen. We can guarantee that Morris is going to see his share of touches. So I'm going to him.
Yeah, Morris. I'm not happy about it though.
What do you think, Pat?
I agree. I think just what you said. It's the floor versus ceiling play. If you think you're in a tight spot with your matchup, throw the Hail Mary with Hunter. If you're confident, go with Morris. And it's going to be a pretty close game throughout, so I can't see the game script getting out of hand where they'll be putting Halou in there and throwing the ball a bunch. So Morris should have a pretty good workload, even though it's a fairly tough matchup.
Yeah, I think that's fair. All right, we do have a team defense question, and to those of you out there that know Team D, I'm not on your side. I play IDP, but only 2% of leagues do, so we gotta love defense somehow. Team defense is just as good. Absolutely love some team defense strategy, and this is an interesting question in terms of strategy. Patriots or Texans? Now, I've said a couple times this week that the Texans could potentially be this year's Chiefs. That breakout team faces a nice cush schedule at least early in the season and gets to kind of roll through and just rack up points. I mean, they get Oakland now after putting up the biggest Week 1 performance against the Redskins. And then we have the Patriots, and the Patriots are always when you have Bill Belichick coaching, you always have a strong potential for a strong defense. They did not look good in Week 1, but that doesn't necessarily mean, we can't judge anything based on just Week 1 alone. So, guys, Patriots or Texans for Week 2, what's your play?
I'm going with the Texans, and I had the Patriots pretty high to begin the year. The Texans face an easier offensive line. They're both on the road. Both games should be fairly close, but I think I'm going to stick with the Texans. They got a more mistake-thrown quarterback, a young kid. If they get any pressure on Carr, we'll probably see him crumble. So I'll go with the Texans, even though obviously without Adrian Peterson, the Patriots' task is a lot easier.
Absolutely. Ross, thoughts on this one?
I'm not answering this question. No Team D.
You're alienating 98% of the fantasy audience. What I will say is this. The Texans are obviously going to be without Jadeveon Clowney. And a lot of people are saying, well, does this impact? Yeah, of course it's going to impact a little bit, but let's not forget that he's being replaced by Whitney Merciless. Now, Whitney Merciless is not an elite level player, but he's a good edge rusher, and he can certainly get the job done. And Brooks Reed looks like a man possessed, at least in week 1. So they're going to be just fine there. Brian Cushing didn't play every down last week. We're going to see him in that every down role this week. DJ Swearinger is a name that you're going to get to know very well. We saw him as the villain of Hard Knocks, and he's going to continue to put up numbers. So I love that play this week. They're my number 2 defense, in fact, this week against the Raiders, and they're in a lot of my daily lineups. All right, well, the clock has struck noon. There's an hour to go. We have to adjust our lineups, our rankings, and everything, all fun like that. So that's going to do it for us this week. We will be back next week, hopefully with less audio problems and more shenanigans. So for Pat Thorman, Ross Miles, I'm Jeff Ratcliffe. That's a wrap, folks.